The shouting started just loud enough to make people turn. "Sir, I've already told you. This transaction is not happening today." The branch manager's voice cut across the marble-floored lobby, sharp and flat, bouncing off glass and polished steel. The old man in front of her didn't raise his voice back. He stood at the counter in a dark charcoal suit, one hand resting lightly on a simple black cane. His hair was silver, close-cropped. His face was the kind that carried decades. Wrinkles like folded paper at the corners of his eyes, a slow, dignified way of blinking. "I understand your policies," he said quietly. "I helped write most of them, but you're making a mistake." A snort of disbelief came from the young teller 2 windows over. The line behind the old man stretched almost to the sliding glass doors. Phones were already out, not yet openly recording, but angled just enough. People leaned, listened. The branch manager folded her arms. Her nameplate read, "Rebecca Collins, branch manager." "And I understand scams, Mr. Mercer, is it?" She glanced at the ID on the counter like it offended her. "You're asking to initiate a wire for 8 figures. That puts us in a heightened security protocol. And frankly, this ID does not look authentic." "It's my face on the card," he replied. "Issued by your institution. The account number is correct. The wire instructions are ours. You can verify everything by making 1 phone call." Rebecca shook her head. "Fraudsters always say it's just 1 phone call." The security guard shifted his weight near the door, hand resting on his belt. Not on a gun, just a radio and a set of keys, but the posture was the same, ready. A teenager in a denim jacket, standing near the ATM, held his phone visibly now, screen glowing. A red dot pulsed in the corner. "Live." The old man's brown eyes flicked to the camera, then back to Rebecca. "May I ask," he said, still calm, "what about my ID seems suspicious to you?" Honestly, she spread her hands. "The limits, the balance, the story. It doesn't match this." Her gaze swept over him. The plain suit, the scuffed leather shoes, the cane. "I've been with this bank for 17 years. People who move that kind of money don't walk in off the street alone. They have wealth managers. Appointment only. They don't carry a beaten-up briefcase and ask a front-line teller for an urgent transfer." The old man looked down at his briefcase, the same one he'd carried for 40 years. The brass clasp was dull from use. "And," she added, lowering her voice, "we've had a string of identity theft attempts with older clients lately. So I'm not taking any chances." The teenager's livestream comments began to crawl. "Bro, they blocking this grandpa from his own money?" Another day in America, face with rolling eyes zoom in. Asked him what's happening. The old man exhaled slowly. "My name," he said, enunciating each syllable, "is Charles Daniel Mercer. I am here to authorize a transfer from the Mercer Community Impact Fund to the Southside Housing Cooperative as scheduled. Those apartments will not close without this transfer." Rebecca's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. "Right. Sounds very noble." She tapped the keyboard and shook her head. "We've placed a temporary hold on the account. Standard when something looks off. Our fraud department will review it." "How long?" he asked. 7 to 10 business days." A murmur ran through the line. From the corner, someone muttered, 7 to 10 days? For his own money. The teenager in denim stepped closer. "Sir, do you want me to keep recording this?" he asked quietly. Charles turned his head, studying the boy for a beat. "Yes," he said. "I think you should." Rebecca's eyes flashed. "You can't record in here," she snapped. "It's a public space, ma'am," the teen shot back. "And you're denying this man his funds." Security's shoes squeaked as he stepped nearer. "Phone down," the guard said. "Now." The red dot stayed. Charles looked at Rebecca again, his expression almost sad. "You're not going to like how this ends," he said gently. "Oh." Rebecca folded her arms tighter. "Are you threatening me now?" "No," he replied. "I'm telling you that you're making a professional, ethical, and deeply human error. The kind of error that costs people homes. The kind that costs institutions much more than money." Her cheeks reddened. "Security," she said, not taking her eyes off him. "Please escort this gentleman outside. If he refuses to leave, we'll have to involve law enforcement." The guard nodded and took another step forward. Charles didn't move. Behind him, the line widened into a loose half-circle. Soft curses, disbelieving laughs. An older woman in a floral dress shook her head and whispered, "Lord, not again," as if this were a rerun of a show she'd seen too many times. "I will step outside," Charles said, "after you make one call to verify who I am. And I told you, to your regional director, or, if you'd prefer, to the number printed on the back of every corporate badge in this building. There's a code there. Give them my name. Then make whatever decision you'd like." Rebecca leaned across the counter, lowering her voice. "I don't let manipulators tell me how to do my job, Mr. Mercer. You're stalling. Security, let's go." The guard's hand touched Charles's elbow, light but firm. Phones rose now like a forest of glowing rectangles. "Yo, they putting hands on him," someone said. "That's enough," the guard grunted. "Sir, I'm asking you to come with me peacefully." Charles straightened, drawing himself to his full height. The cane hardly seemed necessary now. He looked at Rebecca, then at the crowd, then at the hovering phones. "Very well," he said quietly. "You don't believe I belong here. You don't believe this is my bank." He smiled, a small, almost weary smile. "In a few minutes," he added, "you're all going to find out exactly whose bank this is." 8 hours earlier, the city was still soft with morning. Sunlight slid between high-rise towers, pooling on the glass facade of Mercer Continental Bank headquarters. 52 stories of steel, stone, and intention. In a corner office on the 48th floor, a coffee mug steamed on a desk that had seen board presidents rise and fall. The mug read, "Build what you never had." Charles Mercer stood before a wall of glass, watching the city wake. He wore the same charcoal suit, the same plain tie. There were more expensive suits hanging in his closet at home, the kind stylists pushed. He never liked them. He liked this one, the one he'd worn to sign the papers when his little community bank merged, when the zeros on the balance sheets leapt into a different stratosphere and everyone started calling him Sir a little too much. Behind him, the TV on mute showed a business channel. Bright-toothed anchors smiled under the caption. "Racial wealth gap still widening, new report finds." They gestured to charts he'd memorized decades ago. On his desk, a framed black-and-white photo watched him. A narrow street in Birmingham, red brick row houses. A boy of 10, dark-skinned, skinny, with patched knees, sitting on concrete steps, a schoolbook open on his lap. Beside him, a woman in a uniform dress and apron, her tired smile aimed at the camera. His mother. He remembered the way her hands had shaken counting tips by candlelight when the power was cut. Remembered her saying, "You're going to learn their numbers better than they do, baby. Then you're going to turn them around." He had. He'd started as a junior accountant at a bank whose lobby he'd once been chased out of for sitting too long. Back then, his job had been to make silent spreadsheets sing. His managers took his numbers and presented them in boardrooms he was never invited into. He remembered the first promotion they tried not to give him, how they'd picked a man with less experience, more comfort for the clientele, how Charles had stayed late, running the figures until they couldn't deny that without him, the branch would have collapsed. He'd been passed over 3 times. The 4th time, he'd been ready. He'd built his own network, his own small coalition of tellers and back-office staff who trusted him more than their actual bosses. When the branch manager finally retired, the staff started a petition, "Promote Mercer." The bank ignored it. So he'd walked away. He'd taken the quiet respect of the community with him and opened a modest storefront on a street that smelled like fried chicken and motor oil. Mercer Community Credit Union was painted in chipped blue letters over the door. He'd sat at a metal desk and given loans to barbers and daycare owners when everyone else called them too risky. He'd watched them build something brick by brick, chair by chair, toy by toy. 30 years later, his credit union had become a regional bank. 10 years after that, a national one. Then, almost against his will, a global player. They added Continental to the name. He'd let them. But he'd kept Mercer. He'd watched the suits get sharper, the deals get bigger, the numbers turn abstract. And he'd made them promise that the mission would never be. No predatory overdraft games. No trapping people in invisible fees. No closing branches in neighborhoods just because they weren't high yield. It was a constant battle. The higher you climbed, the more the air wanted to thin out. That morning, his assistant, a sharp young executive named Myra, stepped into his office, tablet in hand. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer. Board call in 20. I've got your talking points." He tore his eyes from the photo of Birmingham and turned, smiling. "Morning, Myra. How bad is it?" She gave him the half-laugh that meant you already know. Activist shareholders want to revisit branch footprint in low-income neighborhoods. Again, they're spinning it as optimizing resource allocation, meaning closing branches where the carpet isn't thick enough, he muttered. She hesitated. There's also the compliance report from yesterday. We had another frontline complaint about discriminatory treatment. South River branch this time. Customer flagged as suspicious for trying to deposit cash from a small business. He's already on TikTok. Charles closed his eyes briefly, the muscles in his jaw tight. "Show me." She tapped her tablet, then angled it toward him. He watched silently as a grainy video played. A brown-skinned man in a stained work shirt arguing with a stiff-backed teller. Phrases like policy and verification being thrown like shields. A security guard hovering too close. The video ended with the man being told to come back with someone who can vouch for you. The caption beneath read, "Same bank, same story. Just trying to deposit money I earned." The comments were a storm. Hashtags, calls for boycotts, calls for lawsuits, arguments about just follow the rules. People posting their own stories. "How many this quarter?" he asked. "Frontline discrimination complaints?" Myra scrolled. "Officially filed? 16. Unofficially?" The social media team has flagged over 50 posts with significant engagement. He looked past her, out at the city again. From up here, the streets were just lines. You couldn't see the look on a man's face when he walked out of a bank feeling smaller than when he walked in. "Sir," Myra said gently, "you've already ordered mandatory training, new scripts, more audits. You can't personally." "Yes," he cut in. "I can." He turned back to her. "What branches are on my calendar today?" "Just the Riverside Investor Lunch and the quarterly review. We didn't schedule." "Clear the afternoon," he said. "Pick a branch. Any branch. A random one in the city. I want to see what it feels like to walk in without an appointment, without a suit from PR hovering behind me whispering, 'That's the CEO. Be on your best behavior.'" Myra's brows drew together. "You want a surprise visit?" "No," he said. "I want an honest one. Put the address on a sticky note. That's all." She hesitated. "Mr. Mercer, not everyone at the front line even knows what you look like. You've been doing video town halls, not branch tours. You sure you want to go in unannounced?" He looked at the old photo again, the boy on the steps with a book. "Yes," he said softly. "I'm sure." "Okay." Myra tapped her tablet, then tore a page from a pad and scribbled an address. "Midtown branch. Busy. Good mix of clients. I'll text the driver." He picked up the paper, folded it neatly, and slipped it into his pocket. "No driver," he said. "I'll walk from the car by myself." And Myra, "Yes. Don't call ahead." She smiled faintly. "If anyone gives you trouble," she said, "they'll find out fast enough who they're talking to." "That's what I'm afraid of," he replied. "I don't want people to be nice because I'm me. I want to see how they act when I'm just another old black man with a cane." "Why?" she asked. "Because that," he said, "is where our soul lives as a company." He left the office an hour later with only his briefcase and his ID. In the elevator, two junior analysts chatted about projections, oblivious. In the lobby, the security guard nodded respectfully, not knowing he'd founded the system that paid his wages. Outside, the city roared around him. He breathed in the exhaust, the food carts, the concrete heat, and he felt something like a prayer forming under his ribs. Let them pass this test, he thought. Let them be better than the stories. The moment the security guard's hand touched his elbow in the Midtown branch, Charles realized how small the lobby really was. From the outside, it looked grand, double-height ceilings, polished stone, 3 glass-walled offices on one side. Inside, the air felt tight now, crowded with phones, tension, and the low hum of whispers. "Sir, I really don't want to make a scene," the guard said. He was in his late 40s, white, broad-shouldered, tattoos peeking from under his cuff. His name tag read H. Lawson. "It's already a scene," Charles said mildly. Rebecca's eyes flicked to the phones, calculating. He's being disruptive. I'm being insistent, Charles corrected. There's a difference. One of the tellers, a young woman with box braids, chewed her lip and looked between them. Another teller, a man with close-shaved hair and glasses, stared at his screen, jaw tight. "Excuse me," a woman from the line interjected. She wore a navy blazer and carried a laptop bag. "If his ID matches and the account exists, why not at least call the number he gave you?" Rebecca didn't look at her. "Ma'am, this is a matter of security. We're trained to recognize red flags, and this situation has several." "Like what?" the woman pressed. Rebecca hesitated, clearly weighing how honest she wanted to be with an audience. "Large transfer, no prior appointment, insistence on overriding our fraud protocols, hostile attitude." "Hostile?" Charles arched an eyebrow. Rebecca flushed. "And inconsistencies between the client's presentation and the profile on file." "The client's presentation," the woman repeated slowly, as if tasting something bitter. "Meaning what he looks like. I'm not going to discuss internal criteria with you," Rebecca snapped. The teenager's live stream was filling with comments and little red hearts. "This the same bank from that other video? He's too calm. You can tell he's somebody. But they call cops before they make one phone call. Tag the bank, tag the news." An older man stepped out of line, phone in hand. "I'm calling the local news tip line," he said to no one in particular. "This is ridiculous." Rebecca's jaw clenched. "Security, take him outside. Now." The guard firmed his grip. "Sir," he said through his teeth, "let's not make this worse. Just step out with me. You can come back when fraud clears you. And the housing co-op whose closing depends on this fund." Charles asked, "When their deal falls through and the building goes to a developer who'll double the rent or tear it down, should they come back in 7 to 10 business days too?" Rebecca rolled her eyes. "We can't verify any of that. For all we know, this is a stunt." "A stunt for what?" a voice from the back called. "Views." The teenager lifted his free hand. "It's already at 3,000 people live," he announced. "Chat wants to know the branch address." "Stop filming," Rebecca said sharply. "Nope," he answered, popping the pic. "You're trending, ma'am." Charles could feel his phone buzzing in his pocket now, over and over. Calls, texts. Myra, probably. Maybe the board chair. Maybe corporate communications. Already seeing the live stream their social media manager had flagged. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he placed both hands on the counter, palms flat, and looked right at Rebecca. "Just to be clear," he said, "you are refusing to verify my identity using internal channels. You are refusing to process a scheduled charitable transfer from an established account. You are threatening to remove me by force, and you are placing a hold on this account without cause. All based on your assessment of my presentation." There was a slight tremor in Rebecca's nostrils. "We are following protocol to protect our clients," she shot back. "If you are who you say you are, you'll be thankful later." "So thankful I can't access my own funds?" he asked softly. "If you keep arguing," the guard said, voice tightening, "we'll have to call the police." "Already done," someone murmured from behind the teller counter. There was a reception phone off its cradle, a young employee whispering into it, eyes wide. Charles watched him for a moment, then turned back. "Call them," he said quietly. The word rippled through the room. "Sir," Rebecca began. "Call them," he repeated. "I have never in my life called the police on a bank. But banks have been used to call the police on people like me for generations. Let's see what happens when this one goes the other way for once." The teenager's phone trembled in his hand. "Oh my God," he said, "call them." Flushed face, he knows he's right. This is about to blow up. In the corner, the teller with the glasses, his nameplate read J. Brooks, kept glancing between his monitor and Charles. "Miss Collins," he said suddenly. "Not now, Jordan," she snapped. "Miss Collins," he said again louder. "Can you come here for a second?" She shot him a look that promised a performance review, but walked over anyway, heels clicking on the tile. "What?" she hissed. Jordan turned his screen so she could see. Charles watched her eyes skim the account details. Saw the moment her expression faltered. "What is this?" she murmured. Jordan swallowed. "That's the client profile, the one you're holding the funds on." Her gaze moved down. "Account holder, Mercer Community Impact Fund, primary signatory, Charles D. Mercer." Risk rating low. Relationship. Legacy. Founder/executive. Under that, a small notation. Flag. Executive level. Do not restrict without corporate authorization. Rebecca's cheeks lost color. This has to be. Jordan clicked a tab, bringing up the internal intranet profile associated with the name. A professional headshot appeared. Silver hair. Dark suit. Warm, serious eyes. Charles's eyes. Beneath the photo. Charles D. Mercer, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Mercer Continental Bank. The room seemed to tilt. Jordan's voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. I think that's him. Rebecca's throat worked. No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't just walk in like this. Not without security. Not without. He said he helped write the policies, Jordan said. Rebecca turned slowly, her eyes landing on Charles again, as if seeing him for the first time. He met her gaze, nothing smug in his face, just a quiet, worn-out patience. Jordan cleared his throat. Miss Collins, he said a little louder now, glancing at the phones filming them. Maybe we should make that call. She stumbled backward, almost bumping into the security guard. Mr. Mercer, she stammered, the name tasting different now. Sir, if you'll just come into my office, we can. No, Charles said gently. We'll stay right here. The livestream comments exploded. Brew, he's the CEO? Someone dropped the banks at right now. This is a movie. The landline behind the counter started ringing. Hard. Urgent. Jordan picked it up, pressing it to his ear. Yes, this is Midtown Branch, he said, voice trembling. Yes. Yes, he's here. Yes, right in front of me. He swallowed. Understood. One moment. He held the receiver out, his hand shaking. Mr. Mercer, he said. It's corporate. Every eye in the lobby was on the receiver. On Charles. On Rebecca, whose hands had curled into fists. The security guard took a step back, letting go of Charles's elbow as if it burned. Charles walked slowly to the counter, came tapping softly on the marble. He picked up the phone. This is Charles Mercer, he said. There was a pause, then a voice boomed loud enough for those closest to hear. The chief risk officer, breathless and horrified. Mr. Mercer, we are so sorry. We're watching the live feed. Please stay exactly where you are. We're dispatching compliance and HR right now, and the regional president. He'll be there in minutes. Nothing will happen until... Charles's eyes flicked to the teenager's phone, to the words live feed scrolling. Apparently, he murmured, there already is a live feed. Behind him, the lobby had gone very quiet. Even the people in line who'd muttered about just wanting to deposit their checks now stared, a shared unease settling in. He set the receiver down gently. Now, he said, turning to face the room, the crowd, the staff, the eager lens of the internet. Let's talk about what just happened here. And in the stunned silence that followed, the entire branch waited, breath held, as the balance of power shifted in an instant. Consequence has a weight you can feel in your bones long before the paperwork catches up. For Rebecca, it arrived in the form of an older black woman in a navy suit with a lanyard full of badges, compliance and ethics, HR, legal affairs. Her name tag read G. Alvarez, Senior Compliance Officer. It also came wearing an expensive watch and a forced smile on a man in a blue suit. Regional President C. Morrison. They rushed into the branch 20 minutes after the phone call, finding the lobby still crowded, the tension unbroken. No one had left. If anything, more people had come in, drawn by the cluster of phones and a murmured phrase, the CEO is here. When they arrived, Charles was sitting on a lobby chair, cane resting across his knees. Jordan sat next to him, posture stiff, his screen still open to the internal profile. Rebecca stood behind her glass office door, white-knuckled around a stack of forms. Security leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes bouncing from his manager to his boss's boss's boss. The teenager with the live stream whispered, "They're here," to his chat. Save the live in case they try to delete it. Tag the CEO. Tag civil rights orgs. The regional president approached Charles first, hand extended. Mr. Mercer, he began, his voice thick with practiced warmth. On behalf of the entire region, I want to... Charles didn't take his hand. Chris, he said, using the man's first name with a gentle finality. I'm not here as your CEO right now. I'm here as a customer who was treated as a threat for trying to move his own money. Morrison's mouth opened, then closed. Alvarez stepped forward, her gaze sharp behind her glasses. Mr. Mercer, she said, may we speak in private to understand fully? No, he said. It was quiet, but it landed like a gavel. He turned his head, taking in the entire room. We're going to talk about this here. Because this didn't happen in private. It happened in front of all these people. In front of thousands more on that young man's phone. He nodded toward the teenager, who swallowed hard and raised the device a bit higher. Alvarez's eyes flicked to the camera. She took a slow breath. Very well, she said. Then, for the record, let me start, Charles said. He rose, slow but steady, joints protesting. Jordan half stood to steady him, then sat back, face flushed. Charles stepped closer to the center of the lobby, the crowd instinctively giving him space. It felt, for a strange moment, like a sanctuary, a circle forming around a pulpit that had once been a teller line. In the last hour, he said, I came into this branch as an ordinary customer. I presented my ID. I requested a transaction. I answered questions. I offered multiple ways to verify my identity. Instead of doing that, your branch placed a hold on my account, attempted to have me removed by security, and called the police. He looked at Rebecca, and when I asked why, I was told that my presentation didn't match the profile of someone who moves this kind of money. Rebecca's lips trembled. Mr. Mercer, I was just trying to follow protocol. We've had so many scams and protocol, he repeated softly. That word carries a lot of sins on its back. He turned to the crowd. How many of you, he asked, have ever walked into a bank and felt smaller when you walked out? Hands moved. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. The woman in the floral dress raised hers. The man who called the news did. The teenager, still filming, lifted the hand, not holding his phone. How many of you, Charles continued, have had a check held for your security when what it really meant was someone didn't trust that your money was real? More hands. Quiet murmurs of yup and too many times. How many have been told, we're just following policy, when what you were really hearing was, we don't see you. We see a risk score? This time, the sound was almost a groan. He nodded slowly. This is not about one manager, he said, or one branch, or one bad afternoon. This is about a system that teaches people, quietly, to be suspicious in one direction more than another. It's about a culture that tells staff, you'll be punished if you let a fraudster slip through, but rarely says you'll be accountable if you humiliate a real client. He looked at Rebecca again. May I ask you a question, Ms. Collins? She swallowed. Yes, sir. When you saw my ID, he said, what did you see? She glanced at the cameras, then down at the floor. I saw an elderly man making a very large request without prior notice, she said. I saw recent fraud alerts. I saw the risk. Did you see the words founder and executive on the account? He asked gently. I didn't check that tab, she admitted. Why not? Her eyes glistened. Because, she faltered. Because in my experience, people who hold that kind of position don't look like they need a cane. Or carry an old briefcase. Or stand in line. Somewhere in the back, someone scoffed. Another person made a wounded sound. And, he prompted, anything else? She hesitated, then exhaled, shoulders sagging. And because this neighborhood has had a lot of financial crime, and most of the suspects have been, she winced. They've looked like you. The words hung there, ugly and honest. Alvarez closed her eyes briefly. Charles nodded. Thank you, he said, for saying it out loud. He turned back to the crowd. This is what bias looks like when it's not shouting slurs, he said. It hides behind probability, behind experience. It whispers, be careful with people like him, until people like me are always treated as suspects first, clients second. The comments on the live stream flooded in. This man preaching in a bank lobby. Send this to every manager training program. He's so calm, I'd be screaming. Charles's voice stayed steady. Now, as your CEO, he said, I have to talk about consequences. The word made Rebecca flinch. Effective immediately, he continued, the hold on the Mercer Community Impact Fund is lifted. The wire will be processed today. Housing Co-op gets their building. Jordan's shoulders slumped in relief. Second, Charles said, this branch will close for the rest of the day. Not permanently, but we will stop operations now to conduct a full review of practices, recordings, and decision-making that led to this point. Several people in line groaned at the inconvenience. One man muttered, every time there's a scene, before trailing off under the collective glare of the room. Third, Charles added, every employee involved in today's incident, from management to security, will be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. This is not a firing squad. It's accountability. Rebecca's eyes filled now. Sir, please, she whispered. I have a family. A mortgage. I didn't mean. He held up a hand, not to silence her, but to give her space. Ms. Collins, he said softly, did you mean to jeopardize people's homes today? The ones this fund is meant to protect. She swallowed, tears tracking at the corners of her eyes. No, she croaked. Did you mean to escalate to security before exhausting all verification channels? No. Did you think at any point, if I am wrong, I might be humiliating a real person in front of a crowd and tens of thousands online? Silence. No, she whispered. He nodded. That gap, he said to the room, between what we intend and what we actually do, that is where harm lives. Good intentions don't stop locks from going on doors. They don't unfreeze funds. They don't erase the look on a person's face when security walks toward them instead of a manager walking with them. He turned slightly, facing Alvarez and Morrison. As long as I sit in the chair upstairs, he said, our institution will not hide behind words like isolated incident and unfortunate misunderstanding. This is bigger than that. This is a mirror being held up to us on a live stream we do not control. He looked back at the teenager. How many watching now? He asked. The kid stared at the number. Almost 200,000, sir. A collective intake of breath. 200,000. Charles exhaled. We could spend millions on marketing and never get this kind of attention. Today we got it for free. The question is, what do we do with it? Alvarez nodded slowly, respect in her gaze. We will be launching a full-scale investigation, she said, stepping forward. Externally audited. We will publish the findings. We will revisit training, incentives, disciplinary protocols. No one will be scapegoated, but no one will be shielded from accountability either. And I, Charles added, will be meeting with our board tonight. There will be immediate changes in how we measure success at the front line. It will not be just about product sales and fraud catches. It will be about dignity scores, about client experience metrics that include how often people walk out feeling smaller. He looked back at Rebecca. You may be terminated, he said quietly. That's a real possibility. Or you may be reassigned after extensive training and probation. I don't know yet, but I promise you this. Whatever happens to you today will not be the only outcome of this. We're going to change more than one person's job. Her tears spilled over. I'm sorry, she whispered. I really am. I believe you, he said. But apologizing to the person you injured is the floor, not the ceiling of repair. He turned back to the crowd, his gaze sweeping from face to face, from lens to lens. This, he said, voice carrying now, is our failure. Mine included. I thought policies and speeches and emails were enough to change our culture. I was wrong. Culture lives at the counter, not the top floor. He tapped his cane once on the floor. From today forward, every branch in this network will undergo mandatory, ongoing anti-bias training designed with community partners, not just consultants. Metrics for promotions will include not just numbers, but client feedback, anonymous and direct. Complaints like the one that brought me here will be reviewed by a diverse panel, including people from the communities we serve. And every leader, up to me, will spend time each quarter sitting in these chairs in plain clothes, learning in person what our systems feel like. He glanced at the teenager's phone one more time. And if we ever forget, he said, you all clearly know how to remind us. A ripple of laughter, soft but real, broke the tension for a heartbeat. Outside, sirens wailed faintly, then faded. The police dispatch called off mid-route. Inside, The bank's glass walls reflected a room in which nothing looked quite the same as it had an hour before. The fallout, when it came, was not subtle. By evening, the clip of Charles standing in the lobby had been chopped, captioned, memed, and shared across every platform. The phrase "dignity scores" trended alongside the bank's name. News anchors ran the footage on loop, inviting pundits to debate whether the incident was a sign of deep systemic rot or an opportunity for unprecedented corporate introspection. Regulators called. Civil rights groups called. Activist investors called. The bank stock dipped 3% the next morning, recovered 1%, then hovered as analysts wrote cautious notes with titles like "Reputational Risk at Mercer" and "Culture Shock in Banking." At headquarters, conference rooms filled with tired faces and half-drained coffee cups. PR drafted statements. Legal combed through policies, looking for any exposed wires. In that whirlwind, real people's lives shifted. Rebecca sat alone at her kitchen table 2 nights later, her laptop open to an email with a subject line: "Administrative leave, next steps." Her hands shook as she scrolled. She'd expected to be fired quickly and publicly, a headline. "Manager who challenged CEO terminated." Instead, the email was clinical. She would remain on paid leave while an external firm interviewed staff, reviewed video, read client complaints from the past year. At the end, a panel would decide her fate. Attached was a link to a counseling service. She stared at her reflection in the dark laptop screen. She thought of the times she'd walked an elderly white couple straight to her office to help them with the smallest fees because they reminded her of her grandparents. She thought of the young black man in a hoodie she'd once watched with hawk eyes until he left, clutching his check like a ticket that might be ripped away. She heard her own words from the lobby again. "People who look like you." For the first time, she let herself imagine what it had felt like on the other side of her counter. In a smaller apartment across town, Hank Lawson, security guard, divorced, dad of 2, sat on a worn couch, the TV flickering. His kids had showed him the video the night it went viral. "Dad, that's you," his daughter had said, eyes wide. "You were going to throw out the boss of the whole bank." He'd laughed at first because it didn't feel real. Now, with his own administrative leave notice on the coffee table, the humor was gone. He replayed the scene in his head, trying to pinpoint the exact moment he'd stepped over a line he hadn't seen. "I was just doing my job," he muttered. "I was just doing my job." But something about the way Charles had looked at him, not with hate, but with a tired disappointment, wouldn't let that sentence sit clean in his mouth. He thought of the training slides that always showed suspicious individuals in grainy black and white images, hoodies up, faces in shadow. They'd never looked like the wealthy clients in the marketing brochures. He realized he'd never once questioned that. At the housing co-op across town, a group of families sat in a cramped community room while their lawyer read an email aloud. "The wire has been processed," she said, voice breaking mid-sentence. "The funds are there. The closing is on." There were cheers. Tears. Children laughing without understanding why the adults were hugging so hard. Someone connected a laptop to a projector and played the video of Charles in the bank lobby, the subtitles failing to capture the weight of his pauses. "That's the man who saved our building," an older resident murmured. "He's the reason we're not getting pushed out," another said. They didn't know that for Charles, this was a debt paid forward from a woman in Birmingham who'd counted tips by candlelight. For Charles, consequence looked like a long boardroom table, a dozen faces turned toward him as he spoke. "We can't control how the internet frames us," he told them, "but we can control what we become because of it." Some board members worried about the stock, some about regulatory heat, some, quietly, about their own reputations. But a few looked at the numbers in front of them, a spike in new accounts from communities that felt seen for the first time, surveys from clients who said they were cautiously hopeful, and saw something else, a rare moment when doing the right thing might also be the smart thing. The board approved his proposed changes, not unanimously, but by a wide margin. They created a new executive role, Chief Equity and Dignity Officer, reporting directly to Charles. They funded community advisory councils at every major branch. They set aside a percentage of profits to absorb the cost of eliminating certain junk fees that disproportionately hit struggling clients. They wrote into their public filings a commitment to measure success not just in yield, but in equitable access and client respect. Analysts scoffed at the phrasing, but noted it anyway. And most painfully for some, they agreed to review disciplinary records to see how often people of color have been flagged, restricted, or reported to law enforcement compared to white clients, given similar behaviors. The numbers, when they came back, burned. Charles read the report alone one night, the city lights flickering outside his window. He saw, in cold percentages, all the warm faces he'd failed to reach in time. He closed the binder and pressed his fingers to his temples. "This is what you built," he murmured, "and this is what you let happen inside it." But in the same report, he saw something else, the chance to rebuild. The speech they would later quote in business schools and bar association luncheons didn't happen in a marble hall or a shareholders meeting. It happened back at the Midtown branch on a Monday afternoon 2 weeks later when the doors opened again for the first time since that day. The lobby looked the same marble, same glass. But the signs were different. One by the door read, "Welcome. Your dignity is not optional. It's the baseline." Another on the wall, "If you feel you are treated with disrespect or bias, here are 3 ways to tell US." There was a QR code, a phone number, a physical comment box. Employees stood in a loose semicircle, some in fresh suits, some with older name tags. Rebecca was not among them. Her case was still under review. Hank was there, though, in a different shirt. No badge today, just a guest pass, invited by the new compliance team to listen. Community leaders had been invited. So had local press. So had clients. And again, there was Charles, cane tapping, stepping up to the makeshift podium they'd set on the lobby floor. He looked older today, the events of the last 2 weeks carved into the lines on his face. But his eyes were still steady. "Some of you were here when I walked in as just a customer," he began. "Some of you watched that moment through a screen. Some of you are only here because someone forwarded you a clip and said, 'You need to see this.'" Soft laughter rustled through the crowd. "We have talked a lot, in closed rooms, about liability, about policy, about training modules and metrics and action plans. We will keep talking about those things. They matter. But I want to talk to you, just for a few minutes, about something simpler, something older than all of that." He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Hank. Their gazes met. Hank straightened, almost unconsciously. "I want to talk about dignity," Charles said. "Dignity is not a customer service feature," he continued. "It is not a smile at the end of a transaction or a scripted, 'have a great day,' while you quietly doubt someone's worthiness. Dignity is the starting point. It is the understanding that every person who walks through these doors is more than the sum of their credit score and risk flags." He let that sit. In this line of work, we're taught to see profiles. We're taught to see percentages, patterns, anomalies. Those tools can be useful. They can catch real harm before it happens. But when we start trusting those tools more than we trust our own eyes, our own hearts, our own humanity, we end up where we were 2 weeks ago, calling security on someone who needed a conversation, not a confrontation. He took a breath and glanced at the comment boxes on the wall. "We will make mistakes again," he said. "I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. But here's my promise. We will not shrug them off. We will not gaslight the people we harm by telling them they misunderstood. We will listen. We will apologize. And then we will change something real so that the same harm is less likely to happen twice." He looked at the employees now one by one. "If your first instinct when something feels off is fear," he said, "pause. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? Is it this person, or is it what they look like? Is it their behavior, or is it the stories I've been told about people like them?" He turned to the clients. "If you feel mistreated, I'm asking you not to suffer in silence. I know you are tired of complaining, tired of filling out forms that seem to go nowhere. But silence lets bad habits grow. We have built channels for you to speak. Use them. We will be judged by how we respond, and I welcome that judgment." He straightened, shoulders squared. "And to those who say this is just how banking is, or it's not our job to fix society's problems, I say this: every institution is part of society's problem, whether it admits it or not. Every institution can be part of the solution. We hold people's paychecks, their rent money, their dreams of owning something that no one can take from them. If we can't handle that with humility and care, we don't deserve their business. He paused, his gaze distant for a heartbeat, perhaps seeing a narrow street in Birmingham, a 10-year-old boy with a book. My mother used to tell me, he said softly, "Baby, when you finally get a seat at their table, don't just eat. Make sure the next person doesn't have to beg at the door." He looked back at the crowd. "I've had a seat at the table for a long time now. Too long, maybe, but I let myself forget what the door feels like. 2 weeks ago, I got a very painful reminder." He smiled a sad, wry curve, "And I'm grateful for it, because it means I can still learn. It means this institution can still learn." He rested both hands on the podium. Dignity, accountability, bias, kindness, justice. These aren't slogans for a poster. They're a daily practice. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. When we do, I'm asking you to hold us to the standard we are setting today. He glanced at the cameras for a moment, then back at the room. Not because we are perfect, but because we want to be better than we were. And because no amount of profit is worth the cost of a single person walking out of here believing they are less than. When he finished, there was no roaring applause. Just a long, thick silence, and then the slow rise of hands meeting, the soft sound of clapping that grew into something steady. Hank's eyes were wet. He clapped, too. Months later, the Midtown branch felt different. Not in its architecture, that was still all glass and stone, but in the way sound moved through it. There was more laughter now, more conversations that sounded like actual conversations, not interrogations. The new branch manager, a Latina woman named Marisol with a background in community organizing, spent more time in the lobby than in her office, walking people through forms, asking staff how they were doing. A poster near the ATMs advertised a quarterly community listening session, hosted in the branch after hours. Another promoted small business workshops, led in partnership with local nonprofits. The Dignity Score survey had become a quiet, powerful force. Clients gave feedback anonymously. Some complained about wait times, about confusing paperwork, but they also praised specific staff by name for treating them like human beings, not problems. Across the network, some branches resisted at first. More boxes to tick, more ways to get in trouble. But slowly patterns shifted. Managers realized that their own performance reviews now included how often complaints were resolved respectfully, how comfortable clients said they felt, how equitably policies were applied. On an internal dashboard at headquarters, the Dignity Scores sat alongside Net Promoter Scores and revenue charts. Some investors grumbled. Others pointed out that client retention had improved, that new clients, especially in communities of color, seemed more willing to give the bank a chance, that lawsuits from discrimination incidents had quietly begun to drop. And in the background noise of social media, every time a new clip surfaced of someone being mistreated at some other institution, people tagged Mercer's Bank with a question mark and a challenge. You seeing this? What are you doing different? In a modest office on a lower floor of headquarters, the new Chief Equity and Dignity Officer reviewed reports, met with branch councils, pushed for changes that sometimes ruffled feathers. They had Charles's direct line. They used it often. As for Charles, he still walked the floors. He'd started a new habit after that day at the branch. Once a month, unannounced, he'd choose a location, put on his plain suit, take his old briefcase, and visit as if he were any other client. Sometimes he was recognized, sometimes not. Once, a teller in a suburban branch glanced at his ID, looked at his face, and said, "Is this real?" with a teasing grin. When he nodded, she whispered, "My grandma taught me about you. She had an account with your First Credit Union. Said you were the only one who'd ever sit down and explain her statements instead of just telling her what she owed." He'd had to blink a few times before answering. "Your grandmother," he said softly, "built this place as much as I did." At the Midtown branch, Hank came back, not as security. He'd resigned from that post after his administrative leave ended, before the investigation concluded. In his exit interview, he'd said, "I need to do something where my first job isn't to assume the worst." Months later, he appeared at a community listening session, hat in hand, to apologize publicly. No one had asked him to do it. He just showed up, I messed up, he told the room. I saw a black man being difficult, and my brain went straight to problem. I'm trying to unlearn that. Teachers say trying counts. So, I'm trying. He started volunteering with a local youth program the bank funded, standing at doors now not as a guard, but as a greeter. Glad you're here, he'd tell the kids as they came in. Some of them looked at his big frame and tattooed arms and felt their stomach clench, then relax when they saw the softness in his eyes. He knew the feeling. He noticed. He adjusted. Rebecca's path was rougher. The investigation found patterns in her branch that were hard to ignore. Disparate holds, a disproportionate number of suspicious activity reports filed on clients of color. She lost her position as branch manager, but she wasn't barred from working in the field forever. Instead, after mandated training and a period of unemployment that shook her ideas about security, she took a job at a nonprofit financial counseling center, ironically funded in part by the same bank. There, she sat across from clients whose accounts had been frozen at other institutions. She heard their stories. She saw herself in the employees who just followed protocol. And slowly, painstakingly, she learned to listen differently. She didn't expect forgiveness from Charles. But one day, months after leaving the bank, she received an email. I heard where you're working now. Making repair is a long road. I'm glad you're walking it. CM. She stared at the screen, tears blurring the letters. Sometimes she'd watch the old video of the lobby not because she liked reliving her worst professional moment, but because she needed to remember what it felt like to be certain and wrong at the same time. It kept her humble. As for Charles, after one particularly long day of meetings, he stood again at his office window, looking out at a city that glittered with wealth and want. Myra stepped in, tablet clutched her chest. Board wants your retirement timeline, she said lightly. They're getting antsy. You keep starting revolutions and not letting them know in advance. He smiled. Tell them I'm not immortal, he said. That should calm them down. She rolled her eyes. They want an actual date. He turned from the window, leaning on his cane. When I walk into a random branch, he said, and the worst thing I see is a long line and weak coffee. Then we'll talk about dates. Myra grinned. So never? Maybe, he said. Maybe sooner than we think. He sat down, easing into his chair. These changes, he said, gesturing at the stack of reports, they're not my legacy. They're just course corrections. The real legacy is whether we leave behind a place where someone like that young man with the live stream file can walk into a bank and never feel like he has to hit record to stay safe. Myra nodded. Think we'll get there? She asked. He looked at the photo on his desk, his mother, the boy on the steps, the street in Birmingham. I have to, he said, or I'm in the wrong line of work. And now it comes to you. Because you weren't standing in that lobby when security reached for the old man's arm, when the manager rolled her eyes, when the crowd decided, consciously or not, whether to look away or lean in. You weren't the one with the live stream open, thumb hovering over Go Live. But you have been in rooms like that. You've stood in lines, sat in waiting areas, watched as someone was treated as a problem, not a person. Maybe you've been the one treated that way. Maybe you've been the one behind the counter, making a call you hoped was the right one. So the question is this. When the next moment like that happens, because it will, who will you be? The person who looks away? The one who assumes the policy must be right because it's printed on a sign? The one who jokes about scams and suspicious types and lets fear do their thinking? Or the one who clears their throat and says, why don't we slow down and actually see this person in front of us? The one who asks, what would dignity look like right now? The one who hits record, not just on a phone, but in their own conscience and refuses to delete what they've seen. You don't run a bank. Maybe you never will. But you run something, your reactions, your choices, your corner of whatever lobby you happen to be standing in. What will you do with that power the next time someone is being quietly pushed out of place they belong? And when that moment comes, because it might be sooner than you think, will you be able to look back the way Charles eventually did and say, not I was perfect, but I helped turn the room in the right direction? Sit with that. Then carry it with you to the next line, the next counter, the next day. And if this story stirred something in you, anger, hope, discomfort, resolve, don't let it fade with the closing of a tab. Share it. Talk about it. Ask the people around you what they would have done in that lobby. Because culture isn't just what happens in banks. It's what happens wherever people decide, in real time, who belongs.